All right, it's time to move on to some collisions. First collision we want to be able to do is to get our missile to hit the enemy where it counts and get some points. So, over to our code. We are picking up from the point where we had a Space Invader slowly descending upon us in Space Invader style. And he's just crying out for this poor little missile to go through him and gets us some points, right? So let's go ahead and do that. We always start out by thinking about our variables. The interesting thing here is that we have variables that deal with our missile. We have variables that deal with our enemy being hit. So right now, I don't think we need any new variables. We know what we're dealing with. We just have to actually do it. We do have to add a new function. So let's add a function called collisions. And there is an interesting helping function we're going to want to create in this one to help us with our collisions, but we'll get to that in just a minute. If you're actually in one of my classes, we've hopefully already completed that in a Pong program, and we can just copy and paste it over because we're going to use the same concept. Collisions, if you have never done them, take a little bit of an explanation. The main thing is that when we talk about an enemy's location on the screen, that is one point. It's the center point of a graphic. And our missile is also one point, which is the corner of a line right now, because my line is, I'm using a line for my missile down here. So it's the top quarter of a line. Actually, it's the bottom quarter. I'm sorry, I lied, because I drew this line going up in the air instead of going down, strangely. And so you have more than one pixel that might be colliding. So you can't just say, if something easy like this, like if the enemy's location equals the missile location, and then boom, we have a collision. It's not that easy. I have come to there's a lot of different collision techniques, and there's better ones than what I'm about to do. I call mine box collisions, where I test to see if the entire box of one thing hits the entire box of something else. It's probably clunky, and people who know coding are going to get driven crazy by it. Since I am teaching students in high school level, I find that the way I do it helps them make a little bit of sense about it and hopefully not make their head hurt too much. I hope that's not condescending. After years of experience, I find that I need to simplify this, and it helps me too, honestly, to kind of understand what's going on. So what we're going to do is we're going to create those boxes, and then we're going to see if those boxes hit. So to create those boxes, what I do is I just go ahead and I say, okay, well, if I have a box, I'm talking about a square, it's got 4 sides. A true box in 3D, now that would be interesting. But it's like, what is my enemy's top? What value do I give that? What value do I give an enemy's bottom? That sounded awkward. What value do I give an enemy's left and right edges? So yeah, I'm finding the edges. Why did I do that? Once I find those edges, and it's not that hard to do, what I do is I actually create a little list here. Honestly, it could be a tuple, but I'm going to stick with lists right now. And I say, you know what? Go ahead and put those things. I'm like encapsulating these 4 things into a little list. Get rid of this so you can see what I just did. So, I'm going to have this object that's got 4 parts to it because it's a box, a square. Okay, so my enemy's top. Well, if you remember, I said the enemy's location here is an X and a Y value, which is the center of the enemy. So you could say, oh, okay, if I know how big my enemy is on the screen, then I can figure out where the enemy's top is. Sadly, it's a little bit complicated, and there's probably, again, I think I failed in making something simplified. So I'm actually going to go up here and take a look at my images for a minute. I loaded this good guy image off of some nice guy who shared a space shuttle clip art on the internet. And a UFO from this nice DeviantArt website. I loaded a UFO. Those images were really big. My UFO was 620 pixels wide, which is way too big for a screen, right? If I want to make many of them or make it hard to hit. So I scaled them down. And I scaled them right here in the middle of my draw. Now that it comes to wanting to collide with this thing, this is looking awfully clunky to me. Because how big is my image? I don't even know how big my image is anymore. It used to be this, but I've divided it by 7 for some reason. So that strikes me as a bunch of bad decisions that are coming back to haunt me. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a variable, and I'm going to put this up here in the images because everything has to do with these images that I'm about to do. And I am going to go ahead and actually create, like, I'm going to make scaled width equal to 270 divided by the scale. Now, the reason I'm doing it this way, maybe the scale actually I want to, I could imagine me putting this in a constant up here so I could play around with the scales. But it does, in a variable, it does give me a chance to increase or decrease the size of my image as I play, which could have some interesting effects. I'm not going to use it, but it could. My scaled height would be 598 divided by the scale. My bad guys' scaled width is... Why am I writing these? Well, that was silly. I don't want to write that. I want to write that. That's the most... At least then I'm getting into a point where I'm, what's it called? Abstracting the information a little bit, which I failed to do last time, which got me into this trouble in the beginning. Alright, so now I know how big my image is right at the beginning when I first pull it in, rather than waiting and creating it on the fly down here in this. Now, a lot of programming does like to happen on the fly, but in this case, because I need to know the size of my images here, it will also let me know how to do collisions. So I'm just going to replace this value right here with my good scaled width and my good scaled height. And I don't need to divide by 7 anymore. And my bad scaled width and my bad scaled height. And then if I change my scale, everything I did should now, well, I guess this isn't going to work because I never finished it, did I? I was going to double check my scaling and make sure that I got it right, so I'm going to comment those out. Oh, now sorry. Alright, looks fine. The reason I wanted to show you that is because this is kind of funny. I could immediately change my scale, right? So it's like, the higher this is, the smaller my images are going to be. teenier. Actually, I kind of like 10 more because I think that gives it more of a Space Invaders feel. 15 will go really tiny. Oh yeah, now that's a game. Woo! My bullet's as big as I am, and I still managed to hit the dude. All right. I'll go back to a little bit smaller than I had before, just because hey, I have the ability to. And go ahead and get ready for this now. Because now that I have that, this becomes a little less than a headache. Let me just show you without that, I would have to hit, I'd have to say, you know, take my bad guy's width, divide it by 7, but I also want to find the top of it, which means I have to divide it by 2, and then I have to take all that and subtract it from the enemy's location. And it would be something like that. And this just strikes me as so clunky. I mean, of course you could simplify, but where it's what in the world is 14? Where's that come from, right? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. So instead I can say take my enemy's location and subtract the bad scaled width. Take the enemy's location and add the bad scaled width. Bad scaled width and height. That's, oh goodness, width. I'm glad I said that out loud. Height. Let's try that. Oh, goodness gracious. See, I find this clunky too. I should use a dictionary, but I'm not going to get into that right now. His left is what I was doing before. Suddenly realized I was doing the wrong one. I probably should do a whole new take, but we're not going to do that, are we? Best thing about making these videos is the fact that I can ramble on and on to myself, because, you know, I amuse myself. I do this at night anyway. I might as well record myself doing it, don't you think? Alright, that should set up my enemy if I did not make any more dumb mistakes. The top of my enemy is my enemy's Y location minus the scaled height. Ooh, I did make a dumb mistake. Alright, those of you actually typing in this, pause it here and compare your code to this code, because this code looks better. Now, let's try not to make as big a mess of the missile that we're going to do. Again, my missile is a line, because I like the idea of creating a line that looks like something from Space Invaders, even though my images right now don't look like they're from Space Invaders. If you want to do an object or like an image for your missile, it'd be time to kind of load that image, create some scaling for that image, and then you could use a very similar idea here. Mine's not going to be that different. I'm going to have my missile top. You might ask yourself, why do I do it this way? As far as setting up my formulas, I just kind of like the feel of going back and thinking about my edges after I get all the pedantic stuff done. Right here, doesn't matter what order I put this list in. It only matters in the sense that I want to be consistent. So that when I build my helper function, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to send my helper function these two things, an enemy object and a missile object, and I'm going to see if they collide. And so I need to know that I'm doing it in the same order. Alright, so I've got my missile location. And again, I used a line. That line is actually the bottom of my missile is my Y value of my missile location. The top of my missile is my Y value minus 20. As soon as I see this, it's a big red flag that I should have created something up here like missile length and used missile length down here instead of, or missile height instead of using a number. So I recommend that to you. The left value should just be the X value. I'm not exactly sure how Code Sculptor draws our missile. I made the missile 5 pixels wide. And does it put the line right in the middle? So maybe this is actually minus 2.5 and this one's plus 2.5? Or does it add it all to the end and this one's just a plus 5? If I had a guess, I'd say they put it in the middle, and it would be something like this. It's such a small amount of pixels that I don't think we're going to notice, but we'll add it like that and see what happens. All right, so now we're ready to actually see if we collide, and this is the easy part, because we're just going to say if collide, and then the enemy object and the missile object are going to get sent to collide. And if that comes back as a true, it's going to be a Boolean helper function, then they've just hit each other. And if they comes back as false, they didn't hit each other. What happens if they hit each other? Like, what do we want to have happen? Well, we should probably turn the enemy off. We should probably turn the missile off. You can imagine a whole scheme of other things happening. What if our score went up? How much does our score go up by? 100 points, of course. These enemies just don't die every day. We need to give us some points for it. There is one kind of funny fluke that I always forget until it happens. And sometimes it's better to see it happen and then understand why. So I'm going to leave something out of this right now on purpose, and then we'll take a look at it later. All right, so those are the things that happen if we have a collision. Right now, that's enough to know if it collides, because if our stuff turns off and resets, then we're good. There is one other thing that we should put in there. But first, we've made changes now to some variables, so we should list it. And I'm going to add one more, which is the thing I was just alluding to, is the way that I triggered the ability to shoot my laser is I only allow him to shoot one laser at a time. And if this missile is on, I don't let him shoot again. So what I want to do now that that missile turned off is I want to turn off the fact that the player has triggered to. I could put that. I could imagine a if missile on equals false, then player trigger also equals false. I can imagine putting that somewhere else in the code, but this works just fine. Not a problem. All right, we need to build this function, and then I think it will actually work. So we need a definition of, yeah, that's not how you do that. Define collide, and we are going to get object 1, and we are going to get an object 2, and we're going to see if those objects hit each other. Now what's going to happen is a big if statement to see if these things hit each other. If blah blah blah, if they hit each other, well, return. return true. They've hit each other. Else, they didn't hit each other. We're going to return false. So there's the thing. Now, what's the if statement? So I don't really have an ability right here to draw pictures. I should have a sketch pad or something. But imagine an object and another object trying to hit each other. And basically what happens is if you want to say they're in range of each other, if the bottom of one object and the top of another object are on the same plane, or if the top of this object and the bottom of this object are on the same plane, and then anywhere in between is like the hit zone. So that's top and bottom, and then you also want to do left and right. So we have the top of the enemy, we have the bottom of the missile, and then we have the bottom of the enemy and the top of the missile. So that's like, we want to use those. So we're going to say if object's 1, 0, that's the top of the object. That object, so the top of one object is less than the bottom of the other object. That means the top is somewhere up here. And at the same time, I messed that up. That's the bottom of the object, is position 1. At the same time, the bottom of object 2 is greater than the bottom of object 1 is greater than the top of object 2. See, I made a mess of trying to explain it. But if these two things are true, if this top is less than this bottom, if this bottom is greater than this top, you then know the up and down, the vertical collision has happened. Now let's do the left and right. Sometimes I get this backwards, and then we'll find out and laugh about it in just a minute. So if my enemy's left is greater than object 2's right, and object 1's right is less than object 2's left. Alright, so this is supposed to be measuring basically the top, the bottom, the left, and the right of object 1 as compared to the bottom, top, right, and left of object 2. We return true. If it returns a true, these things should happen. Let's take a look. Rats. But I spell wrong. Missile lock is not defined. Did I spell it wrong? Oh man. This was an old version where I spelled everything wrong. See, always spell incorrectly as long as you can be consistent in your spelling of things incorrectly. I just have to go through a few places and find where I spelled things wrong. You probably didn't have this problem. I also could have just decided to spell them all wrong, but I figured at this point I'm in too deep. One more spot, I think. Let's see how I moved missile. I spelled that one wrong. How about, did I fix that up here? No. Yeah, there's a good chance I missed a few, so I'm just going to hit play until it finds them. There we go. Alright, can I even hit this thing? Oh man, I think I tried to hit it and it didn't happen. Which means I've got an error. which means that it's going to be embarrassing as I try to figure out this error because I can't just stop this recording. There's no way to pause it that I can find. So it's time to do a little bit of troubleshooting. The first thing that I could try to do, honestly, is just see if I was silly and talk myself out of doing it the other way. Because like I said, I sometimes get these signs backwards. Even though I thought it through. Nope, that's not it. So I did something else. And so let me change these back because I think this way is the correct way. Somewhere over here I may have the code for my Pong game. No. And we can see how I did there. There I called it object. And I said 1 greater than 2. And, oh well, I should say 1 greater than 0 and 0 less than 1, which I think is just the opposite of what I just did. 0 less than 1, 1 greater than 0. Three greater than 2, and 2 less than 3. So maybe I just got this one backwards. Maybe that's all I did. That's why I wanted to cut and paste. There we go. That looked better. Ooh, something's glitching funny, which is what I wanted this lesson to be about, not about Mr. Steen's mistakes. Let me just fix that error for a second. All right, so watch what happens when I shoot over here. Every time it gets to basically the same spot on the screen, it glitches out. See that? And what's happening? Well, sometimes it seems to clear itself, but what's happening is my collision is certainly working, and it's saying these two objects are colliding, and then this is basically kind of saying like hide the object and hide the object. So my missile is no longer being drawn on the screen. But just because it's not being drawn on the screen doesn't mean it no longer has a location. It's sitting there. And so what I want to do is I want to say only check for this collision if the missile is actually on. And then later on we're going to have a situation, or maybe you already do depending on what type of, where you are in your program, that you also want to say only test it if the enemy is on, right? So only if the missile and enemy are actually in existence do we want to see if we've hit. That should clear up now if I can actually shoot it. Whoa, that was exciting because I can't spell missile. Are you kidding? There we go. Now we shouldn't see a glitch. It should still function normally. I really should slow this thing down now, I suppose. Ooh, good shot. All right, and then just as a little aside, I put the score here, and I didn't actually, draw my score on the screen. So if you've come this far, we might as well take a look at our screen and say, you know what? We need to do some and then it's just a matter of knowing how to use the draw text function. Fortunately, no. Let's see if I ever did it. I was going to copy and paste it, but I'm not sure I ever put it in mine. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, this is pretty much what we want right here. It's just a matter of remembering how that function works, so I apologize. We're going to put the string of our score on the screen. We need to put a location, where are we going to put that on the screen? Pretty much near the top. So let's just go a little bit over. A tiny, no, we got to go more down than that. Somewhat down. And then we say how big we want that score to be. Well, we don't want it small, we don't want it too big. And I think we have to say the font that we want to make it look in, or maybe that was an optional thing. Oh, the color, of course. We're just going to stick with white for right now. And I got a nice 0 points. Oh yeah, I hit that sucker. Now, one thing that you can test, I don't know if you saw that, but that seemed to hit. It's being very generous in its hit. It's almost like I have to work to miss it. And so part of it is do your hits pass the eyeball test? And if not, what's going on is that our image that we have, I'm going to finish this screenshot in just a minute, but well, here's the image of our bad guy. And I'm going to load him up. And we can't really tell here because we have this white all around it. But the big question is, how much space did the person who created this image leave? For instance, there's a lot of space here at the top, right? This is dead space. If the same amount of space is down here at the bottom, the bullet's coming up and then saying, oh, I hit you, even though it's all the way up to here. Which is why there are better methods for collisions than what I'm using. But the way to do that would be to fix your image up, make it trimmed a little bit, or make some adjustments in your code. When I say, this is my bounding box right here, I could say the bottom of it, for instance, is, it's this, sure, but you know what, it's fudged a little bit. We want it 25 higher than it used to be. And now when I try to shoot, well, apparently it's working. Now that bullet should go a little bit closer to where that image than what it used to do. And if you're like, you know what, still looks wrong to me, then just make it even smaller. And you're basically, you'll notice I use the term bounding box. That looked a lot better. You're trying to draw a box of what you want that collision to look like, and you have the ability to fine-tune those boxes. That's not a problem. I kind of thought I was hitting a little bit on the right-hand side too, so maybe I would subtract some from the right-hand side and see if I can improve the situation there. It's not the easiest thing to test as you try to make sure you hit the guy in kind of awkward situations. See, that was maybe, plus the fact that the guy's moving quickly and so he moves right into my missile. Probably I could get a better test on this if I slowed down the speed. So, I mean, he clearly can miss, but maybe he's still... a little bit too generous. And even on the... I noticed it even on the left-hand side. So, you can play with that. Again, just kind of adjust these boxes. Left-hand side, sure, move that in 25 pixels too. Make it harder on yourself. Why not? Make these numbers too big and you're not going to have a box to hit anymore. But playing around with that, not a problem. One more thing. I put the score on there, which was nice. But wouldn't it be nicer to actually have said something like score colon space plus the score? I mean, come on. We can't just put a number up there. Ooh, now see, that's nice and fancy. That looked like a solid hit. I'm trying to test the left-hand side and make sure I can't get too generous on the left-hand side. Something kind of funky is happening at the very beginning of this sometimes, but it almost looks like it's hitting the score. All right, that's enough for right now. We now have collisions. There are some other options for collisions. Like I said, you could do something other than this box. For instance, what if you wanted to only collide on the bottom instead of like the left and the right and that kind of thing? Um, so you have other options, and you could maybe play with some. I'll be back with some other options when I think of some that I think are worthwhile going into. But this one I find a little bit weird, a little bit lengthy maybe, but once it's there, it makes sense and it works basically for all collisions. All we have to do is keep defining the edges of our objects and then saying if they collide. So now that the logic is here, collisions become easy. Till next time.